Welcome to Mental Health Momentum, a Silicon Slopes podcast. I'm Dr. David Morgan. I am a licensed psychologist and the Director of Mental Health Awareness here at Silicon Slopes. And on this podcast, we talk about mental health issues in business and beyond, and we look for solutions as well. And I'd like to introduce my guest today, Sabrina Gardner. Sabrina, thank you so much for coming.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sabrina. She grew up in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., Vienna, as a matter of fact, which we talked about earlier, because that's where we stayed when we visited Washington, D.C. So
I love it. It's such a great place.
It is a lovely, lovely place. And Sabrina attended BYU, then graduated with a bachelor's degree in geography and marketing. She spent the past 20 years as a working mom in commercial photography and marketing, with incredible opportunities working with different companies, wonderful nonprofits, and traveling to remote parts of the world. There were years she worked full-time and some years that she slowed down so she could be with her 4 children. In 2020, the idea for a business developed, and 18 months later, Salt by Sabrina was launched. Salt offers a full line of premium organizational products in the e-commerce and home builder markets. In 2024, Salt Professional was launched with a new line of organizational products designed for dental offices. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's been really nice to get to know you a little bit just before this. Well, tell us about your family first, just a little bit about yourself that I didn't already read.
Yeah. I actually grew up a little bit all over. I was born in Canada, lived in Boston, California, and then Virginia was kind of the formative years of my childhood. So I love that I got to see so much of the country. And I grew up in a very entrepreneurial home, inspired by my dad and other people in my life. And I'm one of 5 children, and just kind of had a good childhood and lots of opportunities that I'm very grateful for.
And your children are teenagers and above, right? Is that what you said? The youngest was 12? Is that right? Did I get that right?
11, close.
Okay.
Yes. So I have 4 children.
Okay.
I've got 20, 18, 14, and 11.
Okay.
So we've got all the phases going on right now.
Absolutely. It's a busy time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely, it's been a juggling act with
Yes,
working and raising a family.
Yeah. It gets easier. It does. I promise you.
Good to know.
It will. Well, tell me about your interest in mental health. And if you don't mind sharing what you told me earlier, just about your own personal experiences just recently, I think our listeners would love to hear about that.
You know, it's interesting. As I was preparing for the podcast, I was thinking about my own journey with mental health and thinking about how I viewed it. And one thing I noticed from the time I was very young was that I had a need for control. I mentioned to you that I'm a type A personality, and I used to, when I would want to hang out with my friends on the weekend, they were always cleaning their rooms because their parents would be like, you have to clean your room before you can hang out with friends. And my room was always clean. Right. And I didn't realize it as a child, but looking back, I could see that I was creating order and control where I could, because I didn't like when things were outside of my control. And what's interesting is life happens to us, right? And specifically 18 months ago, I was diagnosed with 2 types of cancer at the same time. So totally healthy, no symptoms, and my life was turned upside down in a matter of moments. And you realize that control is kind of an illusion. Yeah. There's very few, there are some things we can control, but very few that we really can. Yeah. And this journey, it's been interesting from a mental health perspective, because my default state is I'm a pretty optimistic and, happy person. And even when challenges come, which I've had plenty, I tend to lean towards optimism. But for the first time going through cancer, there was a time I went through 5 surgeries in 7 months, spent most of the year in bed recovering. And there was a time where I felt like I wished I had died on the table. It was so painful. It was so difficult. And I think for the first time, I really understood what depression felt like. Even if I physically could have been able to get out of bed, I don't think mentally I could have.
Yeah.
And so it's given me this incredible empathy and understanding that I didn't have previously. And so I'm in a weird way grateful for that experience. But it also taught me that not only do we have to let go of control, but we have to understand that this is a real thing. And whether you've dealt with it yet or, most of us are going to face a mental health crisis
Yep.
at some point in our lives. And especially in the business world, there's so much pressure. And so I'm grateful for that experience, and also just to be talking about it and raising awareness for that. But it taught me to let go of control,
Yeah.
and listen, my house is still meticulous. I still control what I can.
You run a business based on organizing things.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
I made a life out of it. But despite that, it has taught me to let go of some of that, and
Yeah.
really to find joy in the present and not worry about the things we can't control, which is what's already happened or what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important for people to hear that everyone's going through something, and that we can get through the very, very difficult things. There might be someone listening to this podcast who's on surgery 3 of 5, right?
Yes.
Right now, and to hear your experience, I think is just very valuable. And the second, I love you just talking about control and the things we can and can't control. In my experience, the things we can control are almost internal. Are almost always internal, right? It's the things inside us, and it's the things outside us that we have very little control over. Yet that's sometimes where we spend so much of our energy trying to manage everything else around us. I've always believed that we have a limited amount of emotional energy every day, just like physical energy. At some point you're going to wear out physically and you have to go to sleep, you're going to pass out or whatever. Emotional energy is the exact same. And so we have to budget it. We have to think, okay, where am I going to spend my emotional energy today? And if we spend it on things that we can't control, it's like pouring it down the drain. It just goes, because you use all this energy, things still don't change. And you're like, what's going on? But if you apply it internally, then there's a much greater chance for it to make a difference.
I love how you illustrated that because I think a lot of times too, we try to control others and their behavior, and it's such a waste of time. Like you said, it's focusing on those internal things. And I think for me as well, having strategies in place, that's something I've really learned. What are the things that ground and reset me so that I can feel more in control? And one of them really is for me why I built a company, which is I love to organize. There's something about taking chaos and bringing order to it that's very soothing to my soul. But even things like, I just love to go on walks with my dog. And so oftentimes in the middle of the workday, I'll take a lunch break and just go for a walk, because it just kind of resets and grounds me. But it goes back to what you said. It's things that I can control that have to do with me internally, and then letting go of the things that we can't.
And so many entrepreneurs are under probably the misguided notion that you just have to go all the time, that if you take an hour to walk your dog, then you're just an hour behind, right?
Yes.
In building your business. And that so how do you negotiate that? Because I think what you're doing is right. I think what you're doing is healthy. But as an entrepreneur, how do you convince yourself of that? So, because someone's going to be listening right now thinking, I don't have time to take my dog for a walk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think there has to be an underlying acceptance of what it means to be an entrepreneur, which means it comes with a tremendous amount of stress. That's just kind of part and parcel. But then having mechanisms in place to deal with that stress are important, and understanding that there's going to be times where you are not balanced in your life. I mean, I remember launching this company, and I was working around the clock, and you just kind of have to do that to get it off the ground. And that's what it takes. But about a year in, I was realizing, oh my goodness, I'm never turning it off. And I was just absolutely fried. And so I started implementing set work hours. And it had to work around my kids too. So I still have to drive my kids, and there's times where they have an orthodontist appointment, and so I got to bump a meeting, or I've got to hire somebody to help me drive. And so there's definitely gives and takes. But if you will prioritize that time off, you will come back better. And I know it's easy to say, but when you actually implement it, I'm at my most effective Monday morning if I take the weekend off. So you've got to have those breaks and build them in, and then know that there will be crunch times where it's all hands on deck.
Sure. Like we were reading in your bio, you started your company about 5 years ago, and that was so your oldest was only 15.
Yes.
Then, so 15 to, what would it be, like 6 or something, or wherever. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's super busy. Do you have any advice for female entrepreneurs in this space, because it shouldn't be, but there's a different perspective on it in our society, unfortunately. And so what advice do you have for women out there who are maybe in a similar situation and thinking, well, how do I balance that? How do I balance being a good mom, which I think most women who have children want to be, but also
Absolutely.
being a good business owner?
I think it's possible to do both. But there's going to be gives and takes.
Okay.
And my kids will tell you there are times where they're frustrated that
Yeah.
I'm not as available as they would like, but you can prioritize both. And with the kids, involve them where you can. So one of the things that I've tried to do is, my oldest daughter, she's going into business. So now she's interning at my company.
Nice.
And even like with photo and video shoots, when we've created content, we've brought the kids in. And what's interesting is sometimes where I felt that mom guilt and felt like, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't have been doing this with my time. Maybe I should have prioritized it. My older son, he wrote an essay on who he admires most, and I had no idea he was doing this, and it was me. And he wrote this beautiful essay about how he had watched me kind of blood, sweat, and tears build this company from the ground up. And you can see the impact that you're having. And especially as a female, for my girls to see that they can do this, like it opens up, the conversation changes within them watching you be successful. So sometimes it can be you are being the very best parent by setting this powerful example for your children.
I agree with that 100%. I love how you mentioned mom guilt, and I thought, geez, we don't even talk about dad guilt. What the heck is wrong with us?
Right?
I don't even think I've heard that term, and we should be having a lot more guilt than we do. But we just don't sometimes. But that idea of setting an example, and not a perfect example, but an example of that shows its flaws, where they can see the warts and things like that. I think that's so important because our children are growing up, especially in adolescence, and they can see all of their challenges. They're acutely aware of their challenges, especially now with social media, and they compare themselves to everyone's best, and they only see their own worst, and so that delta is just huge for them. But when they see someone that they admire, and you can be authentic and real with them and say, you know what? Yeah, sometimes it's a challenge for mom to get these things done. And then they say, oh, then that's okay for me then.
Absolutely.
Because when I feel like it's a challenge for me, then that's okay. I think imperfect examples as mortal beings for us are the best possible examples.
Yeah. And I think that's where we've improved as a society, is that the conversation's so much more real and more open. And the thing is, like, I have the bad days all the time, where you just lose your, you are not patient and you yell and things happen. But what I try to do is own it and with my kids and say, okay, mom's sorry. She lost her crap today. Didn't mean to do that, but here's why. And let them know, like, gosh, I've got all this going on at work. I didn't mean for it to come out sideways at you. That's on me. I'm sorry. And I think there's so much power in sorry too.
Yes.
Teaching them it's okay to make mistakes and there's a way to correct that. And that you don't have to be perfect in the process, but the end result can still be wonderful and beautiful.
Absolutely. We're slowly coming around to that as a society. I think as human beings, there's a natural resistance to maybe just wanting to show that weakness. I think in businesses, it's critical for managers and leaders to show their weaknesses as well, just to have that open dialogue and say, it was hard for me today, or I needed to go see my therapist today, or something like that. Can you imagine what the effect that would have on 1,000 workers? And they would say, wow, that's, if our boss, if she had to do that, then what does that mean to me? And
I think that we get stuck in this idea of a perfect journey.
Yeah.
But all the great stories are riddled with challenges and failures. And that's what makes the stories so good. I have a favorite quote by Tom Brady where in his documentary, he says, he never asked himself, why does it happen to me? He asked himself, why does this happen for me?
Yeah.
And that was really impactful for me because as challenges come, which they do, especially in businesses and families, I just always look for the opportunity in that. And the greatest challenges often yield the very best results.
Yeah.
And if we can just grind through those and navigate those and get help when we need it, ask for, therapy if that's part of the equation, And then I think often we feel like we wouldn't change anything because we love who we are and who we become on the other side of that challenge.
It's like you were saying earlier that in a strange way, you're grateful for your cancer experience just because of the things it taught you, right? And so here you are at the other end of that. And although the middle was just horrible at times, you look and you see, but look at all the things I gained from that. Look at all the benefit that I yielded from that you probably couldn't have gotten, at least probably not in many other ways. I mean, I think there are some things that we almost always have to learn by just hard experience.
Yeah, I agree. And, I'm, like I said, a type A. I'm just a doer. I wake up
You're
with
probably type A minus now just because of the whole, right?
Yeah, I've had to take a little degree off
Yeah,
of,
exactly.
Yeah. But it's like understanding that that's not the be all end all. And that's not really where true joy comes from. And I am not a product of what I accomplished. That's not where my worth comes from.
Yeah.
And I think when you're stripped down to essentially nothing, when you rebuild, you realize, what truly matters, and it gives you a different perspective, which you're so grateful for, and I'm so grateful for. And so I wouldn't change what I've been through.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your company, because I want to hear about this and just how you got the idea and just the challenges that you've had getting to this point.
I had worked, in kind of marketing and graphic design and photography for about 20 years. And I was looking for something that was scalable. But I got distracted because we were in the middle of a big move, and we moved in March of 2020. So I'm not sure, depending on your perspective, the worst or best time to move.
Yeah, really.
And I remember this very specific moment. I was standing in my kitchen. We were just surrounded by boxes, chaos. My kids had just found out they're not going back to school. My husband is in restaurants, not a great industry at the time. And we just all had this look of fear on our faces. And so at the time, I really retreated to what I do to cope, which is create order out of chaos. So I worked around the clock. I think I had our entire house unpacked in 6 days, down to the last pencil, everything organized. And two really significant things happened during that experience. And the first was that I realized there's power in order. I saw a tangible change in my family. The anxiety, our house became a safe haven from what was going on outside. And so it really, when we have kind of this order and peace at home, it empowers us to deal with what's going on outside.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was that the organizational products on the market were severely lacking. Nothing was really designed to fit, to last. It was very much a one-size-fits-all approach, and no drawer or cabinet is the same size.
Right.
So I started looking for a solution, found that there weren't any. And so that was kind of the start of Salt by Sabrina. And now we have a whole line of custom-built products. We also have standard products, but they're all premium. They're designed to last. It's an investment, but it's a one and done. You do it, and it will last the life of the drawer. So
SALT, what's that? Is it an acronym? Is it?
So I'm an avid reader.
Okay.
I love Nike shoe dogs. And he talks about how he chose the name Nike, and it's like the one syllable, but it's got the K, so it's got the little kick.
Okay.
So I was kind of looking for something like that, but I loved SALT because it's clean, it's natural, and it enhances everything you add it to.
I love it. Yeah.
So that's where the name came from.
Well, and I love how you talked about the moving process, and power in order. And you found there was a tangible difference in your home after that happened. There was just greater peace and that. And I'm a fan of that myself. My office is very orderly. It's just, and I don't know, it gives me a little bit of peace as well. But internally, that can happen as well, right? When we feel like there's control and order inside us, I think that contributes to the overall peace of our lives. I think that's what's often missing in people's lives, is they just feel like they're being dragged around by their circumstances, and then trying to control everything else.
Yes.
Right. Instead of saying, well, what can I do to manage my own self today? Looking inside, what can I do to make a difference?
Yeah, I think it's all about intention and being really intentional with your day and with your time. And there's something about the process of organization that it's like you've immediately accomplished something. There's that great book. See, you can tell I read all the time because I'm always bringing up books. Make Your Bed by the military guy. And it's just about like doing something first thing in the morning that makes you feel like you've accomplished something. And every time you walk by that bed, it's that intangible reminder.
Right.
And so I think with our day, you know, a lot of times people just kind of get up and go. But one of the things that I do every morning is I read, because it's just something I do for myself, and it's something that I love and enjoy. And it's just starting my day off with intention that I matter, and that I'm not just there to like be a mom, to be a businesswoman, but actually to be a person too.
Yeah.
And so it's just a small thing, but I think if you're intentional in your day, it can declutter your mind. So I love lists. I love order. There's something about it that really does heal the mind.
Yeah. And I love that idea of being intentional about it, and just those small things. That it's so critical. Most of change is going to happen in just small increments, sustained over time. That is how all powerful change happens. When we try to take big steps, you know, like it's like climbing up a staircase, you know, and say, I'm going to go from step 1 to 10 today and just jump the whole thing. Well, you can't do it.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. And you can spend all your day trying to do that, as opposed to saying, I'll just go to step 2 today and then step 3 tomorrow. And those tend to have the most powerful lasting effects as well, because our brains, that's where our brain works. It can adopt these little changes sustained over time.
Yeah, it's just taking one little step, one little change. Yeah, absolutely. We always tell people start with one drawer. Don't start with the whole kitchen.
Exactly.
It's too overwhelming.
Yeah, exactly.
So even in your personal life, just pick one thing that's small that you can do.
I love how your business is like literally mirroring mental health, you know.
Definitely.
It's like just do one little thing, and yeah, that's awesome. What would you let's talk about a little about stigma associated with mental health. It's like you said, you growing up, mental health wasn't a significant issue for you, which isn't for some people. But then during your cancer, unfortunately, you started to experience more of that. And you said you gained greater compassion. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah. And I would say there was maybe more going on in my childhood than I understood at the time, because I think it was not discussed. You know, generationally, it's interesting because I have the most wonderful parents, you know, raised in a loving home, but things weren't talked about back then.
Absolutely.
And so it's not that, you know, I had this like horrific childhood, but you know, you weren't really allowed to be stressed, or, you know, it wasn't talked about. So I think there's sort of lasting implications of that I think our generation as a whole is unraveling and working to change with our children. So I think a lot of the stigma comes from there was no conversation about it. And that's why I'm so grateful to be here today and talking about it. And this is something that is a continual conversation in our home. I had a period where we, in my adult life, we had some things happen in our family that were pretty difficult. And I just felt upside down about it. And so I went to therapy for a period of time and I was very open with my kids. I was like, guys, I'm just feeling like I need some help processing through this, and even some tools of how to go forward from this. And, you know, as I worked through that, I kind of shared some of that with my kids, and they had been impacted as well. So I think it was so powerful for them to see that it's okay to ask for help, and also see that there's a positive outcome to that you can work through these things, gain the tools, and then that helps you be a healthier person moving forward.
Yeah. And I think there is a generational thing for sure. Like you said, like my parents' generation, that we didn't talk about it much. And I grew up in the 80s, and we didn't talk about it much then. It was happening, but we didn't talk about it much. And we've tried to, you know, elevate that conversation with our children. I think my grandchildren and your grandchildren, I'm fascinated to see how their generation will deal with this, right? Because I think they've had parents that have been willing to talk about it. And the next 50 years are going to be very interesting.
I think they just didn't have the information. You know, there's so much that is now readily available to us and understanding. And so I think we're making all the right changes, and it does take time.
Yes.
But I'm excited to see where the next generations end up.
Me too. Yeah. And I have high hopes. I think we're just going to keep getting better and better. And we've, just like we've always done. We get problems, we figure them out,
Yeah.
and then we move
Each
forward.
generation has its own.
Exactly,
Yes.
and we figure it out, and then the next generation has their problem, and they figure it out from there too. So,
Yeah.
Sabrina, thank you so much for coming and talking and sharing and being vulnerable. This has just been a real delightful conversation for me. I think you're a great example, and just keep up the good work with all that.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you're doing and the message that you're spreading. It is so important and much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening. And remember that change starts with you, and together we can increase our mental health momentum.